So welcome back. We're in the middle of the synthesis of the systems, which is chapter 5 in the introductory section of the synthesis of yoga. He has said, echoing his adage that all life is yoga, in the paragraph that we finished with last time, that the whole of life is the yoga of nature. So nature itself is constituted with a conscious power that develops, that grows, in the modern parlance, that evolves. It participates in yoga, which reconnects the device, pardon me, will I be able to speak tonight? Which connects the diverse to the one, the fragmented to the unifying source of all. It is the aim of yoga, and the aim, we would assert, of a cosmic manifestation, that there be ultimately an integration, a conscious synthesis of all the elements involved in the manifestation, and a grand awakening harmony. That there will be not simply an individual escape from bondage to ignorance, but a liberation into fulfillment, not simply of the awakening individual, but the power of that consciousness transferred into others around, into nature as a whole. Could mean an efflorescence of the concealed divinity in life in a way that we could say brings a perfection to nature. So with a large goal like that, in which we are going to bring all the parts of our being back into a unity, into a whole, we're going to bring them into a synthesis. He establishes what the methods are for that. The method we have to pursue then is to put our whole conscious being into relation and contact with the divine, and to call him in to transform our entire being into his. And that is the meaning of yoga, to yoke ourselves, to govern ourselves, to direct ourselves, so that we can first contact, then become intimate with, then commune with, and then enter into the actual being of the divine. That means that there is consequent upon that contact a return, a response, and that the descent, presumably, of that being into us means that we are in a way new made, that the formation of our being, no longer based in ignorance, undergoes a mighty transformation. Thus, in a sense, God himself, the real person in us, becomes the sadhaka of the sadhana, as well as the master of the yoga, by whom the lower personality is used as the center of a divine transfiguration and the instrument of its own perfection. This is the coincidence of the Supreme Person and the aspirant. It is that being who, awakening the powers in us, actually conducts the yoga, conducts the sadhana. His footnote says, sadhana, the practice by which perfection, siddhi, is attained. Sadhaka, the yogin who seeks by that practice the siddhi. Sad, again from a root that means to go straight. So in spiritual practice, a sadhana takes you straight to your goal. Here, the point is that the divine is the master of the yoga, is the path in front of you, is the being who calls you, awakens you to aspire to the path, is the real being in you who strides through you towards that path, because all is that. In effect, the pressure of the tapas, the force of consciousness in us, dwelling in the idea of the divine nature, upon that which we are in our entirety, produces its own realization. The divine and all-knowing and all-affecting descends upon the limited and obscure, progressively illumines and energizes the whole lower nature, and substitutes its own action for all the terms of the inferior human light and mortal activity. This is something that is very well known and studied in the science of the Tantra. For instance, there's a verse from the Kularnava Tantra. From his transcendence, the Lord, in the form of the Guru, Guru Rupena, frees one from animal bonds. So from above, coming into you, effectuating the change of consciousness, lifting you out of mere animality, where all you are is a creature that consumes, that lives and dies pointlessly. So the divine replaces the human in the Tantra, and Sri Aurobindo echoes that here. In psychological fact, this method translates itself into the progressive surrender of the ego with its whole field and all its apparatus to the beyond ego with its vast and incalculable but always inevitable workings. Certainly, this is no shortcut or easy sadhana. It requires a colossal faith, an absolute courage, and above all, an unflinching patience. For it implies 3 stages of which only the last can be wholly blissful or rapid. The attempt of the ego to enter into contact with the divine, the wide, full, and therefore laborious preparation of the whole lower nature by the divine working to receive and become the higher nature, and the eventual transformation. So first, one has to aspire and attempt the ascent. And of course, he'll write about this in a dozen years or so when he composes the book, The Mother. So the ascent, the thoroughgoing preparation of the nature, after which the contact from the ascent, the preparation and the deepening of the entirety of the being so that it can become one with that, and then finally the transformation. In fact, however, the divine strength, often unobserved and behind the veil, substitutes itself for our weakness and supports us through all our failings of faith, courage, and patience. It makes the blind to see and the lame to stride over the hills. The intellect becomes aware of a law that beneficently insists and a succor that upholds. The heart speaks of a master of all things and friend of man, or a universal mother who upholds through all stumblings. Therefore, this path is at once the most difficult imaginable, and yet, in comparison with the magnitude of its effort and object, the most easy and sure of all. There are three outstanding features of this action of the higher when it works integrally on the lower nature. In the first place, it does not act according to a fixed system and succession, as in the specialized methods of yoga, but with a sort of free, scattered, and yet gradually intensive and purposeful working, determined by the temperament of the individual in whom it operates, the helpful materials which his nature offers, and the obstacles which it presents to purification and perfection. In a sense, therefore, each man in this path has his own method of yoga. Yet, are there certain broad lines of working common to all which enable us to construct not indeed a routine system, but yet some kind of shastra or scientific method of the synthetic yoga. So in the first place, it's not going to work the same for everyone. So what your neighbor does successfully in sadhana may not work for you. You have your own mission, are gifted with entanglements of nature which the cosmos has asked you to puzzle out. The large lines may be the same, but the innings will differ. The order of preparation in advance will differ. He continues, secondly, the process being integral accepts our nature, such as it stands organized by our past evolution, and without rejecting anything essential, compels all to undergo a divine change. Everything in us is seized by the hands of a mighty artificer and transformed into a clear image of that which it now seeks confusedly to present. In that ever-progressive experience, we begin to perceive how this lower manifestation is constituted, and that everything in it, however seemingly deformed or petty or vile, is the more or less distorted or imperfect figure of some element or action in the harmony of the divine nature. We begin to understand what the Vedic rishis meant when they spoke of the human forefathers fashioning the gods as a smith forges the crude material in his smithing. So the divine accepts our nature, such as we bring, because indeed, as he has noted elsewhere, the divine is watchful over us and calls us towards him. So we should not suffer from self-conviction of unworthiness. That is heartbreaking, that people will say, I'm unworthy. I don't have the stuff in me to attempt this. The divine has sparked the aspiration in someone. That alone can lead to success. Being true to that aspiration means that the aspiration will grow and inflame the whole nature. Everything will eventually be caught up in it. It isn't a question of whether a person has the strength to do it, is equipped intellectually with a great physical body and endless vital energy. How many people could practice yoga? Sri Aurobindo noted that he began the sadhana with a very weak physical constitution and poor in vitality. And yet, the descent of that mighty consciousness upon him expanded his being, fortified his body, and he was able to take up this integral sadhana, which aimed at cosmic dimensions. So, let us not unhorse ourselves before we've gotten upon the horse. Let us get up and ride. Thirdly, the divine power in us uses all life as the means of this integral yoga. Every experience and outer contact with our world environment, however trifling or however disastrous, is used for the work. And every inner experience, even to the most repellent suffering or the most humiliating fall, becomes a step on the path to perfection. And we recognize in ourselves, with opened eyes, the method of God in the world, His purpose of light in the obscure, of might in the weak and fallen, of delight in what is grievous and miserable. We see the divine method to be the same in the lower and in the higher working. Only in the one it is pursued tardily and obscurely through the subconscious in nature. In the other, it becomes swift and self-conscious, and the instrument confesses the hand of the Master. All life is a yoga of nature, seeking to manifest God within itself. Yoga marks the stage at which this effort becomes capable of self-awareness and therefore of right completion in the individual. It is a gathering up and concentration of the movements dispersed and loosely combined in the lower evolution. So there is a divine method in the march of nature towards the perfect union with the divine, which is its purpose. So, first, a free and wide-ranging work, then that which accepts our nature as fitted for the arduous demands of sadhana, and finally, bringing into it all life and all experience. Nothing is forbidden, nothing is excluded. All will be poured into the fire and, in that offering, transformed. So, an integral method and an integral result. Sri Aurobindo, trained to write perfect Victorian sentences, writes this beautiful, powerful sentence: an integral method and an integral result. First, an integral realization of divine being. Not only a realization of the one in its indistinguishable unity, but also in its multitude of aspects, which are also necessary to the complete knowledge of it by the relative consciousness. Not only realization of unity in the self, but of unity in the infinite diversity of activities, worlds, and creatures. Now, there are many places in Upanishads which speak to this kind of realization, this summating experience. The Mundaka Upanishad, which people often think is an Upanishad that tends to bring the aspirant towards renunciation, Mundaka, of the razor blade, speaks, I think it's 2:12, that Brahman, the immortal divinity, is all around us. It is above us, to the north of us, to the south of us, under us, around us, everywhere you cast your gaze. The entire universe is a manifestation of Brahman. The one has been multiplied, but has not lost its unity, despite the dividing mind. So we have to get back to that unitive experience, and that's the process of yoga. But not simply the experience inwardly of what it is, not simply the psychological realization of that unity. He moves forward. Therefore, also an integral liberation. If the method leads to the result of being wakeful to the divine everywhere, there is a liberation. Liberation means freedom. Being free, not simply to sit still, but to act. And an integral liberation would mean that you would have the freedom and the power to act from this gathered oneness on all the planes of your nature. So he describes not only the freedom born of unbroken contact and identification of the individual being in all its parts with the divine, sayudhya mukti, by which it can become free even in its separation, even in the duality. Not only the salokya mukti, by which the whole conscious existence dwells in the same status of being as the divine, in the state of Satchit Ananda, but also the acquisition of the divine nature by the transformation of this lower being into the human image of the divine, Saddharmya Mukti, and the complete and final release of all, the liberation of the consciousness from the transitory mold of the ego and its unification with the one being, universal both in the world and the individual, and transcendentally one both in the world and beyond all universe. So he has a footnote down here, the second, as the Jivan Mukta, who is entirely free even without dissolution of the bodily life and a final samadhi. Jivan Mukta, liberated while living. You don't have to cast off the body to have this perfection. You can have it and bring it into the active life. So these words, sayudhya, liberated by intimate union. Salokya mukti, living in the same world as, residing in the same place as. Saddharmya mukti means having the same law of nature, the same community of being, in a sense. By this integral realization and liberation, the perfect harmony of the results of knowledge, love, and works. So the awakening leads to the liberation, the realization leads to the freedom of the members, and then the harmony that flows out of a mind and life and body concordant with each other. For there is attained the complete release from ego and identification in being with the one and all and beyond all. But since the attaining consciousness is not limited by its attainment, we win also the unity in beatitude and the harmonized diversity in love, so that all relations of the play remain possible to us even while we retain on the heights of our being the eternal oneness with the beloved. And by a similar wideness, being capable of a freedom in spirit that embraces life and does not depend upon withdrawal from life, we are able to become, without egoism, bondage, or reaction, the channel in our mind and body for a divine action poured out freely upon the world. And this, of course, is what is meant when siddhi occurs in the tantric paths, that the ego of the human has disappeared. The divine has taken possession of the human vehicle and expresses itself in the world and in its ways. The divine existence is of the nature not only of freedom, but of purity, beatitude, and perfection. An integral purity which shall enable on the one hand the perfect reflection of the divine being in ourselves, and on the other the perfect outpouring of its truth and law in us in the terms of life and through the right functioning of the complex instrument we are in our outer parts, is the condition of an integral purity. Its result is an integral beatitude in which there becomes possible at once the ananda of all that is in the world seen as symbols of the divine and the ananda of that which is not world. And it prepares the integral perfection of our humanity as a type of the divine in the conditions of the human manifestation, a perfection founded on a certain free universality of being, of love and joy, of play of knowledge, and of play of will in power, and will in unegoistic action. This integrality also can be attained by the integral yoga. So he's described an integral method which leads to the integral result of a wholesale realization, the divine realized at every part of our being, not simply a psychological inner mental awakening, integral liberation, in which we find our identity truly in our true self, but also in the world at large, the same identity, the same being manifested there, and the law of being as the same, both in world and self. And then finally, the perfect harmony of knowledge, love, and works, which is the Trimarga of the Gita. This integral purity, he writes about, invites the integral liberty. And then the liberty results in the outflow of this great beatitude, which is the source of all existence, the bliss which gives birth to the cosmos, which seeds the universe with these innumerable souls, who all of them represent the Supreme and the Supreme's possibility of rejoining the source from which they come. Like sparks from a central fire, back to the image in the Mundaka Upanishad, all of us have come, born from bliss, populating what begins as a dark universe, and through the force of our ascent and integration, carrying it back intentionally, purposefully, towards oneness. Perfection, he writes, includes perfection of mind and body, so that the highest results of Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga should be contained in the widest formula of the synthesis, finally to be effected by mankind. So then the divine would play in the human mold and form. At any rate, a full development of the general mental and physical faculties and experiences attainable by humanity through yoga must be included in the scope of the integral method. Nor would these have any raison d'etre unless employed for an integral mental and physical life. Such a mental and physical life would be in its nature a translation of the spiritual existence into its right mental and physical values. Thus, we would arrive at a synthesis of the 3 degrees of nature and of the 3 modes of human existence which she has evolved or is evolving. We would include in the scope of our liberated being and perfected modes of activity the material life, our base, and the mental life, our intermediate instrument. So the scope of the yoga extends perfection beyond mind into the body, capturing all the elements of nature. Nor would the integrality to which we aspire be real or even possible if it were confined to the individual. Since our divine perfection embraces the realization of ourselves in being, in life and in love, through others as well as through ourselves, the extension of our liberty and of its results in others would be the inevitable outcome as well as the broadest utility of our liberation and perfection. And the constant and inherent attempt of such an extension would be towards its increasing and ultimately complete generalization in mankind. So, by extension, social transformation, the realization of a collective dimension of yoga, the perfection of a group soul. So see it in this way: the power of realization in one awakened soul penetrates and uplifts another. This divine, through the awakening soul, has an emarginate impact, a large impact on all the social extension of those in contact with him. This goes back again to the tantric idea of the kula, the family, in which the guru, transferring the attained divinity in his consciousness into the aspirant, awakens that aspirant, and that gets shared in the larger community as a whole, because it's not just the guru and the one shishya, but the family as a whole is involved in it. So many, many disciples, all of whom get lifted up by the power of this central realization in the teacher, and then in the awakening powers of the students or the disciples or the aspirants around. And so you wind up with a well-rounded society, each supporting the other in the conscious advance. We would see Sri Aurobindo, again, about a dozen years from this point, in 1914, begin to achieve that as his ashram comes into being, pioneered by himself and by the mother. The divinizing of the normal material life of man and of his great secular attempt of mental and moral self-culture in the individual and the race by this integralization of a widely perfect spiritual existence would thus be the crown alike of our individual and of our common effort. Such a consummation being no other than the kingdom of heaven within, reproduced in the kingdom of heaven without, would be also the true fulfillment of the great dream cherished in different terms by the world's religions. The widest synthesis of perfection possible to thought is the sole effort entirely worthy of those whose dedicated vision perceives that God dwells concealed in humanity. So the divine, fully invested in cosmos, the divine, fully invested in the individual, the divine, bringing all individuals into a group of wakefulness, which then bears upon the universe. We go back to his opening chapter in the Life Divine. So, this is a yoga for humanity and the universe, a truly cosmic yoga featuring a conscious, effortful evolution. Humanity waking in the individual and in its society, would hold within itself all the tiers, Tiers, and all the spheres of the universal existence in a grand harmony. This idea we see also in the Tantra, which eventually gets vested in the Sri Vidya school in the south of India. But you can find it, of course, in the Trika of the North Indian variety in Kashmir. Within the Trika system was the Kaula school, and in the Krama division of the Kaula school was a great text which really captures things in just a short text called the Dehasta Devata Chakra Stotra. It means the circle of deities in the body. And the deities are the goddesses, aspects of the Shakti. This is part of a practice that probably dates back to the 10th or 11th century. An esoteric practice within an elite, because you had to be part of the aristocracy to have enough time to be able to take up the lengthy rituals that this would demand. So you would have to give all your life to it. This is something that's true about Tantra generally. People think that Tantrics go wildly living a riotous life, when actually they're very much chained to a particular discipline, which is all-consuming, because the attempt to replace the human with divine powers and consciousness is not something, as Sri Aurobindo said, which is a shortcut. So there is a supreme self in this teaching. The universe emerges from this supreme self as a manifestation of it. And within this universe, there is a triadic arrangement. Obviously, there is the divine, the energy of the divine that manifests, and then the individual who stands in relationship to both the manifesting energy and the supreme source of all. The body is animated, is moved, is directed, is enforced in its life by the indwelling energies of various goddess powers. They all reside within the aspirant, within the mandala. The mandala is a demarcation of you, of your own being, described in the wider context of full being, whether it's cosmic or whether it's beyond cosmos. But within that description, within that mandala, is where all these goddesses are situated, and the mandala is your body. The lotus, representing itself as the mandala, contains all of these goddess powers within it, who want to come to wakefulness, and that is achieved by daily visualizing them so that you come into communion with them, so that they can lean into you and invest you with their radiance and power. And so, at the core of your being, in your heart, in the lotus of your heart, all these goddesses, all these deities are seated. They have surrounded this lotus, and they send upon you their energies. These gladdening goddesses shower you with gifts as you begin to attend to them, as you begin to acknowledge and awaken to them, accord yourself to them. And the cosmic properties, the powers, the experiences that they can afford you become yours. They swim in your being as you become consanguineous with them, as you have the same bloodstream that they have. So the body then becomes inhabited, really inhabited by these goddess powers, and they become a kula, a family within you. They work and live within you as a family. And then you, looking out, realized into the larger society, human society around you, which, if those friends and family members practice the same sadhana as you, begin to reverberate with the same power that is alive in these goddesses which are actuating your life now. You can see how it builds from one level to another. So this hymn that we're talking about shows how the enactment of this ritualized visualization makes divinity coincident with your being. The ego begins to disappear, and the conscious goddess powers, representing the wakefulness of Shiva, radiate through you into the world. All of it, of course, soul, energy of the Shakti, Shiva himself, are the same single self, the only reality. The same self that makes the body dance is the same self that creates the cosmos. So, when you change the consciousness in your body, waking up your psychology, divinizing the life energy that flows through you, and investing that in the physicality of the flesh and bone in your body, then you are changing the cosmos at the same time, because they are the same reality. So it's worth talking about this because, again, the idea of these goddess powers taking birth in an aspirant is part of what Sri Aurobindo offers to those around him on the 24th of November 1926 and thereafter, when he has the realization of the overmind in the physical cells of his body, and brings the mother forward and says she is now in charge of the ashram, and she will conduct your sadhana, and she will bring all of us into a greater society based on soul values. And these goddess powers that she represents in her person can take birth in you. And the four chief powers, of course, were Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati. Just like this, all contained within you, representing the chief powers of your conscious being. This is how we find the bridge between the timeless and time, between the infinite and the finite, between the essence and the particular, is through the realization that makes it real to the body. However great these truths are, until they are situated in the physique, then the universe doesn't have the answer it's looking for. So that is what the sadhana of Mother and Sri Aurobindo came to be. Here, he's laying out the large lines, as you can see in the beauty of the language, just how vast his vision is. From realizing that essence, you have the possibility of reaching the power of that awakening into your actual fleshly life and into society and into a waiting world. There is no being who will not feel the improvement in the earth atmosphere when we as humanity live in that consciousness. So the question is, will we do it? We're not powerless. We have the power to transform ourselves. It's inborn. We have the power to recreate the world, to harmonize it. Will we? The mother's birthday is on the 21st, on Thursday. So we look forward to that. It's always an opportunity for another advance, a moment to live as a larger group with the soul that animates us all. She is that. So here's a passage from Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release. Oft inspiration with her lightning feet, a sudden messenger from the all-seeing tops, traversed the soundless corridors of his mind, bringing her rhythmic sense of hidden things. A music spoke, transcending mortal speech, as if from a golden phial of the all-bliss, a joy of light, a joy of sudden sight, a rapture of the thrilled undying word, poured into his heart as into an empty cup, a repetition of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. In a brief moment caught, a little space, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts, lodged in the expectant stillness of his depths, a crystal of the ultimate absolute, a portion of the inexpressible truth, revealed by silence to the silent soul. The intense creatrix in his stillness wrought. Her power, fallen speechless, grew more intimate. She looked upon the seen and the unforeseen. Unguessed domains she made her native field. All vision gathered into a single ray, as when the eyes stare at an invisible point, till through the intensity of one luminous spot, an apocalypse of a world of images enters into the kingdom of the seer. A great nude arm of splendor suddenly rose. It rent the gauze opaque of nescience. Her lifted fingers' keen, unthinkable tip bared with a stab of flame the closed beyond. An eye awake in voiceless heights of trance, a mind plucking at the unimaginable, overleaping with a soul and perilous bound the high black wall hiding superconscience. She broke in with inspired speech for Sith and plundered the unknowable's vast estate. A gleaner of infinitesimal grains of truth, a sheaf binder of infinite experience, she pierced the guarded mysteries of world force, and her magic methods wrapped in 1,000 veils. Or she gathered the lost secrets dropped by time in the dust and crannies of his mounting route, mid old forsaken dreams of hastening mind and buried remnants of forgotten space. A traveler between summit and abyss, she joined the distant ends, the viewless deeps, or streaked along the roads of heaven and hell, pursuing all knowledge like a questing hound. A reporter and scribe of hidden wisdom talk, her shining minutes of celestial speech, passed through the masked office of the occult mind, transmitting gave to prophet and to seer the inspired body of the mystic truth. A recorder of the inquiry of the gods, spokesman of the silent seeings of the Supreme, she brought immortal words to mortal men. Above the reason's brilliant slender curve, released like radiant air dimming a moon, broad spaces of a vision without line or limit swam into his spirit's ken. Oceans of being met his voyaging soul, calling to infinite discovery. Timeless domains of joy and absolute power stretched out surrounded by the eternal hush. The ways that lead to endless happiness ran like dream smiles through meditating vasts. Disclosed stood up in a gold moment's blaze, white sun steps in the pathless infinite. Along a naked curve in bournless self, the points that run through the closed heart of things shadowed the indeterminable line that carries the everlasting through the years. Pages 38 through 40. So, we'll see if we had better experience this time. Namaste, Jai Ma.